I stood there, clutching the edge of my father's mahogany casket, my knuckles white and my heart shattered, when my older brother, Julian, stepped up to the podium, cleared his throat, and told a room full of grieving relatives that our family home, the house our father built with his own two hands, was going on the market Monday morning to cover his massive gambling debts. The gasps that rippled through the funeral parlor felt like physical blows to my chest. And in that moment, the grief I felt for my father was instantly eclipsed by a white-hot, vengeful rage toward the man who shared my blood. Was I wrong for what I did next? Or would you have also burnt his entire life to the ground to save your father's legacy? I really need you to listen to how this unfolded, because what started as a day of mourning turned into a war that stripped away every mask my family had been wearing for decades. To understand why this hurt so much, you have to understand who my father was. He was a man of the earth, a carpenter who spent 30 years saving every penny from his small business to buy a plot of land by the lake and build a sanctuary for us. He didn't just build a house, he built a fortress of memories. He carved our heights into the doorframe of the pantry. He hand-laid the stone fireplace where we spent every Christmas, and he always said that as long as we had that roof over our heads, we would never truly be poor. My brother, Julian, was always the golden child in my father's eyes, despite being a consistent disappointment in reality. Julian was charming, handsome, and had a way of talking people into things they knew were bad ideas. While I stayed behind in our hometown, working a steady job in accounting and helping Dad maintain the property as he got older, Julian moved to the city to make it big in real estate. Or so he said. In reality, he was chasing high-stakes poker games and betting on sports with money he didn't have. For years, I suspected things weren't right. He'd call Dad asking for loans for business investments, and Dad, being the selfless man he was, would always empty his savings to help his eldest son. When Dad got sick last year, the medical bills started piling up, and I was the one managing his care, sitting by his hospital bed every night while Julian was too busy with a closing to visit more than once a month. When Dad finally passed away 2 weeks ago, I was devastated. The house was all I had left of him. It was legally left to both of us in the will, 50-50, but Dad had made it clear he wanted it to stay in the family. I had already planned to move in, keep it up, and eventually raise my own kids there. But Julian had other plans. Throughout the entire wake, he was twitchy, constantly checking his phone and stepping outside to take hushed, frantic calls. I thought he was just grieving in his own way, but I couldn't have been more wrong. When he took that stage at the funeral, he didn't talk about Dad's kindness or his hard work. He spoke for 30 seconds about moving on and then dropped the bombshell. He told the entire congregation that because he was the executor of the estate, he had already signed a preliminary agreement to sell the house to a developer who wanted to tear it down and build luxury condos. He claimed it was the only way to settle the estate's debts, which I knew was a lie because I had seen Dad's books. The only debts were Julian's. He looked me right in the eye from that podium with a smirk that said, "There's nothing you can do about it." I felt the world tilt on its axis. My mother was sobbing, my aunts were whispering, and Julian was already shaking hands with a man in a sharp suit at the back of the room, the developer. I realized then that my brother wasn't just a loser. He was a predator who had waited for our father's heart to stop just so he could cannibalize his corpse. So that's the situation I was thrown into at my own father's funeral. I was grieving, humiliated, and about to lose the only thing that mattered to me because of my brother's greed. Before I tell you how I spent the next 72 hours systematically destroying Julian's plan and his reputation, I want you to pause and comment below. If your sibling tried to sell your childhood home out from under you at a funeral to pay for their own mistakes, what would your first move be? Would you try to talk to them, or would you go straight for the throat like I did? Let me know because I need to know if I'm the villain here. After the service ended, I didn't cause a scene. I didn't scream or throw a punch, even though every fiber of my being wanted to. Instead, I walked up to Julian, gave him a cold, hard hug, and whispered, "You shouldn't have done that here." He just laughed and told me to grow up, that cash is king and Dad would have understood. That was his biggest mistake. He assumed I was the same quiet, pushover younger brother I'd been when we were kids. He forgot that as an accountant, I had spent the last 3 years handling all of Dad's finances. I had copies of every wire transfer Dad had ever sent to Julian. I had records of the loans that were never repaid. And most importantly, I knew something Julian didn't. Dad had changed his will 3 months ago when he realized Julian was never coming to the hospital. Dad hadn't removed Julian, but he had added a very specific right of first refusal clause and a behavioral morality clause regarding the executor's duties. I went straight from the cemetery to my office. I stayed up for 48 hours straight, pulling every bank statement and every recorded conversation I had with Dad about his wishes. I also did a little digging into Julian's real estate firm and found out he was being investigated for embezzlement. He wasn't just in debt, he was desperate to avoid jail. On Monday morning, the day he was supposed to sign the final papers with the developer, I showed up at the lawyer's office with a police officer and a private investigator. I didn't just stop the sale. I presented evidence that Julian had attempted to coerce our father into signing over the deed while Dad was on heavy pain medication in the hospital, a document I had intercepted weeks prior. I filed for an emergency injunction to strip Julian of his executor status based on his conflict of interest and his pending criminal investigation. But I didn't stop there. I leaked the story of what he did at the funeral to his remaining business partners. By Monday afternoon, the developer backed out, terrified of the bad PR. By Tuesday, Julian's firm dropped him. By Wednesday, he was served with a lawsuit for the return of the $200,000 he had effectively stolen from Dad over the years. He came to the house that night, screaming, pounding on the door, calling me a traitor. I stood on the porch of the home he tried to kill, and I told him that he was no longer welcome on Dad's land. I told him he could pay back the estate or go to prison. He ended up having to declare bankruptcy, and he's currently living in a studio apartment while working a job he hates just to garnish his own wages. My mother doesn't speak to him, and the house is finally safe. I spend my weekends now finishing the porch Dad started. It's quiet here, just the way he liked it. Looking back, people tell me I was too harsh, that he's still my brother and I shouldn't have ruined his career. But he tried to sell our memories to pay for a poker hand. I believe I did exactly what my father would have wanted me to do. I protected the home. Like this video if you think I was right to protect the family legacy at all costs, and subscribe if you want to hear more stories about people finally getting what they deserve. Share your final thoughts on this whole mess in the comments section. Did I go too far, or did Julian get exactly what was coming to him? I'll see you all in the next story.